So before I get started, let me sort of ask one thing. So I was told I should speak for an hour. I never speak for an hour straight. So I'm hopeful, because this is politics, people are interested in politics, that you will break in anytime there's a question. This is the right size for a group for us to have a conversation. And so there's no reason for us to do this in a very, very sort of orderly, I speak for an hour and then I get 30 minutes of questions. When something unusual or something you disagree with or something you want to talk about more comes up, please ask the question. The other thing I want to do is sort of as a way of sort of motivating what my larger approach to studying elections is. And this actually takes off from this wonderful introduction that Shalini gave. There's a book that's just come out by an author named Ornit Shani, and she's a historian, and she traces the challenge of making the first electoral roll in India. It's actually a wonderful book, and the management of elections is, of course, a big challenge. But the other thing that we don't really talk enough about is that when you move to an electoral system, you fundamentally shift who's in power, or at least you have an idea of who's in power, and that is the voter, right? To create a voter list also empowers an individual that had not yet been empowered in India. And when I study elections, I'm always surprised by how little people think about this particular issue. When I say I study politics, people say, which leader have you spoken to? What about this party? Who ruled for this long? Nobody ever talks about voters, right? So when I I'm going the wrong way. Let's try going back. When I look at a picture like this, right? So this is a picture from fieldwork in Assam, and basically what happens is, as you know, during elections, every party starts planting flags. These children went and found all the flags, stole them, and started chasing each other with them. And so we had them, stand, and you can see the bunch of parties here. But when people see this, people see canvassing. What I see is I see future voters. I see people who are living in an electoral system, experiencing elections as a child before they vote, but who develop their own opinions about how they should engage with the system. And so a lot of the work that I do that is qualitative and quantitative is about just going into villages, talking to people. During the election campaign, I don't talk to any party leaders. I don't talk to any party workers. I talk to them after the election or well before an election. But during election time, it's only about voters. And so some of what I'm going to do today, I'll give a more data-oriented presentation. I'll bring in some qualitative work. But when I'm talking about electoral outcomes, the reason why I like to think about electoral outcomes is that it's something that voters have decided. And it'll be very obvious why I'm sort of bringing up this introduction as we go forward. Okay. So I'm going to start with the 2014 election. And I'm giving you information that probably all of you know, that the BJP by itself won 282 seats on 31% of the vote share in 2011. And just the election before, in 2009, the Congress had won 206 seats off of 29% vote share. And this suggests that there's some extraordinary amount of volatility that exists in the system. And as we know, at the state level, this volatility is even greater, which means that the number of the seats that are shifting across parties, the vote share, the UK elections, the US elections, these have been in the news recently. If you look at the kinds of vote shares and seat shares that are shifting between election to election, it's only a few percentage points, right? It's not 10%, 15%, 20%, the kinds of things that we've become so accustomed to seeing in national and state elections. So that's sort of the first motivating factor. The second thing, and actually this is a phenomenon that's dying down, but especially post-1991, we have seen a period of anti-incumbency. So anti-incumbency means when somebody wins, even if they run again, people want them even less than someone who's never run before, right? It's extremely hard for somebody to win 2 times in a row. This is a phenomenon that's starting to come back towards even. It is no longer incumbency or anti-incumbency when we look at data. But What's interesting about this is almost every other major political system we can think about has very strong incumbency effects. When somebody gets elected, they get elected again. And I want to start with these two ideas because all of the things that we often think about when we talk about voting behavior and how voters should be behaving in India sort of assumes that actually people are behaving quite differently than this. And I want to sort of start with a very sort of, I'm going to skip that for a second. I want to start with sort of a very, very stereotypical version of how we see the voter. So, and a government owns institutions, then it should be the case that this same government gets elected over and over and over again. With respect to the 2014 election, one of the arguments that was made is that when the Congress announced NREGA, right, the Employment Guarantee Act for farmers, that was a game changer, that was patronage to all of the farmers in the country, that nobody could ever win. So that was sort of the narrative around the 2009 election. 2014, we saw what happened. So one model we have is, well, if you control state resources, you can hand out money and you have all this patronage at your disposal. But our electoral outcomes look actually remarkably different from that. In fact, if you're in power, you're less likely to come back to power again. The other sort of big narrative we have is that people only vote their caste instead of casting their vote, right? It's sort of a classic turn of phrase, that all I care about is my caste, nothing else matters. But let's imagine a world in which that is every single person is just voting their caste and nothing else. And certain castes are associated with certain parties. If that were the case, then what we would see is elections wouldn't really change very much, because ultimately people's opinions are changing over time, but people's caste aren't. People's caste isn't, right? So if caste isn't changing, then why aren't vote shares staying completely remarkable? Why are we seeing this level of volatility in the system, right? So yes, there are certain caste groups that one time affiliated with the BJP and one time affiliated with Congress, but it doesn't explain the scale of volatility that we're seeing here. So here's the sort of first, I'm sorry, it's not as clear as I'd hoped. Here's the first sort of image that I want to give you. The two bars to the left are the 2009, and two bars to the right are 2014. And what I want to show from here is that it is always the case that the UPA, that the lower you are in the sort of social hierarchy, OBC compared to upper caste, compared to SC, compared to ST, compared to Muslim, that you are more likely to be a Congress voter than a BJP voter. But that masks the huge amount of volatility we see. So somebody who was upper caste was likely to vote for the BJP about 28% of the time in 2009, and that jumped to 42% in 2014. This is going from 25 to 35. This is going from 17 to 25. Once we get to STs and Muslims, you see that it sort of flattens out and there isn't much of a difference for percentages voting for the BJP. On the other hand, you see that for the Congress, it was right around the same in 2009. 28 to 27% were 27% were likely to vote for the Congress, and that dropped to 19%. Again, there was a drop among OBCs. There's a slight drop among SCs, and STs and Muslims, there's not much of a change, right? So the reason why I want to show this is that we often say, well, somebody of lower caste, somebody who's Muslim, somebody who's OBC is more likely to vote this way or that way. That's true. That's true in 2009, and that's true in 2014. What it masks is that there's huge volatility within the groups in terms of your willingness to vote for one party or another. I'm not going to talk too much about this data source. This is from a survey that I had run at some point. Obviously, we don't know people's personal vote choice. This is from a public opinion survey. But these numbers are bang on with what most other surveys found, and this particular survey was able to predict the elections with a fair amount of accuracy. So before I go on, do people have any questions about what I'm talking about here in terms of caste behavior, electoral volatility, why I want to sort of cast some doubt on our standard notions of state control of resources, handing out money, caste voting? Any questions before we move on? Yes? I'm sorry? Minor communities like Christians and others. Yeah, so in this particular survey, even though it was a fairly large survey, the sample size was just not, it was not fair, right, to do something like that. Okay. Okay, so a map that many of you have seen. That which is saffron is what the BJP won by itself in 2014. That which is blue is somewhere it contested but lost, and that word's gray, it may have had an ally but it didn't contest itself. Okay, so what we know is that 282 seats looks like a lot of the country, especially the Hindi belt. So I want to sort of start by thinking a little bit about regional variation. If we look at this map, it's very clear that there are certain places where the BJP is doing very well, and if I just trace starting from Bengal down the eastern coast, you see that the BJP is either losing a lot of seats or not contesting. Right? And that's something that shows up very much within the data that we work with. In 2014, there's 6 states, and I'm going to come back to these 6 states, remember them, Bihar, Gujarat, MP, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, and UP, that are responsible for 70% of the seats that the BJP wins. It had a strike rate of 91%. Now, the strike rate is a concept I'm going to use all throughout today's talk. A strike rate is basically the percentage of seats you win as a function of the number of seats you contest. So in other words, if I've contested 10 seats and I win 3, I have a 30% strike rate, right? Okay, now consider these 5 states, right? AP, Kerala, Orissa, and West Bengal. The BJP only won 7 out of 100 of these seats, strike rate of 7%, right? So what you're seeing in this map is the same thing that we sort of intuitively can think of, that you have certain states that are bringing in the vast majority of the kitty, and certain states which are not. You have extraordinary amount of regional variation. And what we're going to try to do in the rest of the little bit of time that I have to talk about 2014 is to figure out what was going on in those states and not in these states that explains something about what happened in 2014. Okay, so that's just showing you some more how bad it is. Okay, so in order to get some sense of how the BJP was competing, I coded a party as being competitive if it was one of the top 2 vote getters in a constituency, right? And what you find is that the BJP was competitive in almost 80% of the seats in which it contested. And when it was competitive, when it was one of the top 2 vote getters, it won almost 85% of the time. So it almost always won. Okay. So if we bring that map out, you can see that it's competitive in a large number of places, and almost where it's competitive, it's almost winning. There's again this funny band that is showing up here on the east, where the BJP is not competitive. Okay, and then there's some places where it didn't contest. Yeah. Yes.
But that's Karnataka. So it's competitive.
It's competitive, yeah.
So it is competitive in Karnataka.
Yeah.
So it's a different.
So no, there are other states in which the BJP won. I'm just showing that its concentration of seats is coming from certain states. So for instance, Chhattisgarh also swept. Okay. So one way to sort of think about the BJP's success is that let's look at how it did compared to Congress. So when it's competitive, there are two parties that are top vote getters. And often it will be Congress and BJP, they're the top vote getters in a constituency. And we can see that when you go head to head against Congress, Congress is almost completely wiped off the map, right? And in fact, what we know is that the BJP had even a better strike rate. So around the country, it had a strike rate of 66%. Against the Congress, it had a strike rate of 88%, right? Against Bihar and UP, 2 very large states, it had a strike rate of 85%. Just these 2 phenomena alone, just competing against the Congress, so not having to compete against a regional party, and these 2 states in which the BJP has a base for reasons I'll talk about in a second, yields almost 90% of all the seats the BJP won. So part of the reason why I want to go through this number in a very large number of different ways is that I want to express just how concentrated the BJP victory is. When you win 282 seats when only winning 31% of the vote share, it means that you basically have no wasted votes. Where you're competing, you're winning, and when you're losing, you're not even in the game. Right? So that's so that's basically what I just said. And here's some more detail of what we get. The next thing I want to talk about, and this is now bringing a little more data to the problem. So right now I just gave you something that resembles a data summary. So we had an instinct that now Prime Minister Modi and then candidate had a huge impact on the election. A lot of people called it a Modi wave. And I wanted to see if there was any evidence for this claim. And so the way we want to understand this is that, is it true that Modi is actually bringing people to the polls? And if so, can we start understanding where he's bringing people to the polls? And so what I do is I undertake an analysis of turnout change. So turnout change meaning comparing the 2009 turnout in a constituency to the 2014 turnout in a constituency. So let's say turnout was 70% once and it's 80% 2014. That's a 10% increase in turnout. So this in many ways is the big takeaway from 2014. When turnout change was less than 5%, so when there wasn't much of an increase in the number of people coming out, the BJP only has a strike rate of 24%. It actually loses most of the constituencies. When it succeeded in getting more than a 5% increase in turnout, its strike rate is over 80%. Right? So this is, we're talking about Bayesian stuff. This is a slightly complicated statistical model, but what it's modeling is the probability of the BJP winning a seat as a function of its turnout change. And what you can see, I've clustered the points by color. You can see that in the 0 to 5 range, all this blue means that they lost, and all this saffron means they won. So what is going on is almost a stark change right around 5-6 percentage points, and you can just see this thing just shoots up, right? So there really seems to be a relationship between getting people to turn out and the BJP winning. So the first question we should ask ourselves as sort of social scientists is, well, who's turning out? Where is this happening? So one way to do this, thinking back to the BJP-Congress relationship I brought up before, is that are people particularly angry against the Congress? There seems to be some evidence of that. The turnout increase is greater in areas where the BJP was competitive against the Congress party. But it's still quite significant even in places where the BJP was competitive against another party. What is interesting is when the BJP was either not competitive or didn't contest, you didn't get those kinds of turnout increases, right? So there seems to be a very direct relationship with the BJP being competitive in a constituency, one of the top 2 vote getters, and bringing out huge numbers of new voters.
Was this in the 19th also when you say BJP competitive against other?
So what is it just all I'm doing is I'm classifying every parliamentary constituency by whether the BJP was one of the top 2 positions. So then it's competitive. So there's no incumbency and anti-incumbency here. So I'm actually taking them both together. In reality, it's going to be huge anti-incumbency because the Congress won a lot of seats in 2009 and it lost almost everything, as you saw on the map, in 2014. But what's interesting is now we've sliced the data in a few different ways, and you can see that there's a very, very strong relationship between when it looks like the BJP has some possibility of winning and a lot of new people coming out, and when it looks like the BJP has no possibility of winning in that seat and not people coming out. So if I do a heat map here, where the more red it is, the higher the turnout is, one of the things that's really fascinating is it's even spatially almost identical. Where the map is way more red is also where the map is way more saffron. So it isn't just some kind of weird thing where a couple of constituencies, constituency by constituency, where people came out at much higher rates than they had in the past. We are seeing that the BJP won. So how do we make sense of this? So, I'm sorry?
So, taking into account the fact that 2014 compared to 2009. This incremental voter turnout, was it in a way linked? Can it be in a way linked to the younger people coming more and voting, and that vote going to BJP? Was there any such trend?
So my own instinct is that, so that data is basically impossible to track, unfortunately, the way that it's reported. My own instinct is yes. I think the population that I think about, and somebody hopefully will do the study at some point, is small town India, urban, but not major cities. That seems to be a space in which this version of the BJP and Modi does very well. So also the kinds of places we think of as being places with large trader communities and so on and so forth. And a lot of those people had felt completely, a lot of them were uninterested in the political system until somebody like this came along. So that's my instinct as to, where it is. So absolutely, sort of young entrepreneurial class. But one way that I can break this data, which is a little more interesting as well, is I can look at your turnout in 2009 and I can look at your turnout in 2014 by state. And remember I asked you, you need to remember some names of some states. It turns out of the 15 largest states in India, the 6 lowest turnout states in India are Bihar, UP, Maharashtra, MP, Rajasthan, Gujarat. The same 6 states that are responsible for 70% of BJP's vote share. All of these places you're seeing almost double digit, only in MP you don't get double digit increases in turnout. Now, let's look at West Bengal. Assam actually had an increase in turnout, although the BJP did reasonably well. But Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, Orissa, Tamil Nadu. Those are the 5 states I named, right? So 5 of the top 6 are the 5 of the top highest turnout states in India. So I'm going to throw it out to the audience. I said I don't like to talk the whole time. Can someone, there are lots of things that these states have in common and these states have in common. What's the first thing that comes to your mind? What is different about these states as compared to these states? I've told you these states have very low turnout and these states have very high turnout. Regional parties. And why do regional parties matter? Mobilization, right? Right. And they mobilize vote. And why do they mobilize voters well? Focus on local issues. Right. Language, identity, right? So it is the question of these particular states. So you'll notice that Karnataka is sort of right in the middle, but it is a state that, so Karnataka is the one state that you can't really make too many predictions about from this principle. But Karnataka also has not had an aggressive language movement the way that, let's say, Tamil Nadu has, right? And these are places in which political parties have constructed a subnational narrative. It is very much about identity. It is very much about regional parties. And one of the things that you'll notice that is very interesting is that one story could be that people saw Modi and people saw the BJP and they said, okay, everyone's going to vote for the BJP. That doesn't seem to be what happened. What seems to be what happened is that there were a set of voters that turned out in the Hindi belt, and there were a set of voters that never turned out. And Modi sort of mobilized a group of people who weren't coming out to the polls, and now they came out to the polls and they gave the BJP big victories. In these vernacular states, people don't speak Hindi. The BJP has a big Hindi-speaking base. People have already been mobilized by particular networks, by particular identities. In these states, it doesn't seem like the BJP did very well because it didn't seem like it converted any voters. It simply brought new voters out.
Odisha and some of the north people have come, but they have not voted for BJP. Right? I don't know if
Assam they did some, but yeah, Orissa, by the way, is the biggest mystery in all of
those northeast states, right?
Yeah.
Arunachal, if you see,
right,
it's very red there, but it's blue in the second one. So people have come out and they are voting against BJP. BJP lost there, right?
BJP lost there. But these are, I mean, so I agree. I mean, so the Northeast is a very hard state, sort of, there's a very different kind of politics as we've seen in the most recent elections. The BJP has gained a lot of ground in the Northeast as compared to before. So one of the things that's very tricky, and it's the same issue with Orissa, right? In many ways, Congress has been replaced now, right? There was a time when Congress was openly the number 2 party, and now it doesn't seem to be the case. But more than the Northeast, I find Orissa to be the most puzzling state, and it's everyone. I've asked politicians, nobody can really figure out. Even in 2014, people were saying, okay, this time the BJP is going to finally take Orissa. And when push came to shove, the BJP lost 19 out of 20 seats, right? And yeah, you know, and the turnout increases are there on the ground. They seem reasonably popular, but it didn't convert into elections. This man Patnaik seems to have a certain skill. BJD. He seems to have a certain skill at keeping the voters in the fold. Okay. So how am I doing on time? 20 minutes? Okay. So I'm going to talk now. So now that is sort of setting the ground for some of the ways in which I'm thinking about it. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about my field studies. I'm going to talk about 2 elections with 2 very different results. I'm going to talk about UP, where the BJP swept, and Gujarat, where the BJP won, but did much less well than they had hoped and than many other people had thought they would do. So before I go into this discussion, we now know that the BJP swept in UP. It won 312 seats here, I think, was in this particular count. This was not, but it won whatever, around 300. It won something around that number out of 403. I want to bring this back to caste. I want to bring this to sort of thinking very closely about how it is that caste works within this political system, and how it affects movements in the vote share. So, one of the things that we're going to see is that there isn't a big difference between 2014 and 2017. As we talked about in 2014, the BJP had swept UP as well, and that was a bit of a surprise. Interestingly, the only place where the BJP did much worse, these are strike rates again. These are BJP strike rates. I'm sorry, I should have written BJP there. The only place where the BJP did much worse is actually in the 6th phase, and that's actually where Yogi Adityanath from. That's Gorakhpur. So it's kind of an interesting thing that the chief minister came from the one place where the BJP actually had a big fall. And this is Varanasi. This is where Modi did his roadshow. So it's sort of interesting because the places where the BJP held par are exactly the places that neither Yogi Adityanath nor Modi put much effort into. But that's just sort of those weird things. So what I want to talk about today is this notion of the intersection between patronage, using state resources to benefit someone, and identity and caste. It's something we talk about all the time in India. I'm going to use the phrase particularistic politics, but it can be anything. But it is basically this idea that the BSP, Mayawati's party, was disproportionately targeting Dalits, but beyond Dalits, her own community, which is the Jatav community. And the Samajwadi party, Mulayam Singh Yadav's party, and his son now Akhilesh Yadav's party, was disproportionately targeting the Muslim community and the Yadav community, but more the Yadav community, right? And so I'm going to start with a couple of paragraphs I'd written, and this is you can find it. I'd written this article in the Hindu, but I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs from that, and then I'm going to actually, at the end of this presentation, read a couple more paragraphs from this. In the small cantonment town of Babina, about 20 kilometers from Jhansi, we join an ongoing conversation inside a tailor's shop. It's a diverse group, Hindu and Muslim, forward caste and backward caste, and some are voting for BJP while others are voting for BSP. But nobody will vote for the Samajwadi party, SP, here. Village after village is emptied out due to Yadav terror. You can go 2 kilometers from the canal and see for yourself if I'm lying, whispers a Muslim tailor. He alleges that local Yadavs, under the cover of SP rule, have aggressively seized land from the locals. The fear is palpable. As a Yadav elder walks by the shop, everyone goes silent. Akhilesh has done good work, but we can't have an SP candidate win from here. I will have to vote for the BSP this time, says the tailor. Akhilesh Yadav, the incumbent chief minister of UP, went to the polls showcasing his development work. He remains highly popular across a broad swath of the population. His slogan, Kaam Bolta Hai, the work speaks for itself, aims at building a narrative around economic development and popular government-run programs. But Mr. Yadav has a problem. Whether fair or not, throughout UP, his party's organization is still largely associated with Yadav domination of the local bureaucracy, police, and social structure, and ruling through fear and violence while diverting resources towards their own caste. Even after a very public battle to rid the SP of undesirable elements, Mr. Yadav has been unable to rebrand the SP as a party primarily concerned with broad-based development, consistent with his own reputation, as opposed to a party that primarily caters to the interests of Yadavs. Okay, so this is something that we observed, right? I mean, we didn't know what the election result was going to be. This was a week in. This was when actually people said the SP was going to win the election. And we go to this small cantonment town. This is not an area the BJP has strong roots. And we pick up this kind of anger and this kind of frustration. So we sort of knew something was going on. Well, this is what I want to sort of get at, right? Often what we talk about as caste politics, and what I'm going to argue here is that there's an economic logic here, and a law and order logic, right? That it isn't just about coalitions, it is about a particular notion of particularism. It is that there can be counter-mobilization. If I believe that a certain leader is only targeting a narrow percentage of the population, then it makes perfect economic sense for me to vote against that leader or that party. Now the puzzle is, why did BSP and BJP last for BSP and SP last for so long if they're targeting such small percentages of the population? I'll talk a little bit about that, but I can just give you sort of my own instinct, to start. The top two parties were BSP and SP for a very long time. Even if I wanted to vote for somebody else, who am I going to vote for? The BJP was not in the game. I had to pick one of those. So some of you will remember that there was this big discussion in the public space that Mayawati had cracked the caste code and all these upper castes now love Mayawati. I have been warning people from day one. I said that is not what's going on. Upper castes are strategic voters. They do not like Mulayam Singh Yadav. They prefer Mayawati to him, but they don't actually like either of them very much. And what I believe what you were seeing at that time was just strategic voting. Anyway. So one of the things that has become a hallmark of this version of the BJP is the ability to swallow up independent candidates, small parties. So what I've done is I've just taken the aggregate share of the major parties, and I've added Congress in here as well, although it's not a huge vote getter anymore, but Congress, BSP, SP, and BJP just added up their vote shares in 2002, 2007, 2012, 2017. And you can see that it just skyrockets in 2017, right? That the BJP won a lot of the vote share, and really nobody else is really getting much vote share at all. In all of these other places, there are independent candidates, small parties. Even if they're not winning the seats, they're actually getting some vote share. By the time we get to 2017, the BJP has gobbled all of them up. And this is very similar to that turnout logic, right? It is this ability to mobilize votes and mobilize people who've been disenchanted with the system. If I'm voting for a third party that has no chance of winning, or an independent candidate that has no chance of winning, I'm disenchanted with the system. I just want to vote for my guy and leave everything alone. So here we go to the first sort of data explanation as to what happened in UP. So let me tell you a little bit about the data sources I'm using. It's very simple. All I've done is I've taken the publicly available electoral results and I've matched it to the census data. And so I've only looked at districts. You can break it down smaller and smaller, but there's no academic benefit to doing so. It's just more detailed. So there was a lot of discussion this time that, hey, even the Muslims voted for the BJP. Otherwise, how do you get this kind of victory? That's not what happened. When the district had less than 40% Muslims, it had an 83% strike rate. When it had more than 40%, and there are districts that are more than 50%, the strike rate dropped to 66%. So it was a pretty strong drop, right? And remember, the strike rates are very high because the BJP won almost every seat in UP. So again, not going to talk about the underlying statistical models, but I want to talk a little bit about what this graph shows. This is very similar to the turnout graph I showed. What I've done is I've modeled the percentage of Muslims in a district and the probability, this is the same thing, of the BJP winning. Okay, and the red line is 2014 and the blue line is 2017. Now you can see that they closely track each other, and there's this funny thing happening. When the percentage of Muslims gets around 40%, the strike rate shoots up, and then it drops like a rock, right? So let's sort of, why do you think, why might this be, what is this shape telling us? So I'm going to sort of now throw this out to the audience. I often tell people what this means. When I see something, right, this is not a secular decline or a secular increase, right? It is sort of shooting up and then shooting down. What's happening?
It's a polarization politics. If that polarization effect is not there, I mean, if I see that 40% are there in that, then
Exactly.
I will not vote for BJP if I am belonging to that right wing.
Exactly.
So
This is textbook evidence of a polarization effect. When there are no Muslims around, I mean, the BJP is still obviously doing well, but when there are no Muslims around, you can't polarize against Muslims, or no one cares, right? When there's a sufficiently large group of Muslims around, then you can. Once the Muslim population becomes too large, then you can't win. Then your probability of winning drops like this. So we find a lot of evidence of this kind of polarization in the data. But I should say one thing. People like, won't people be upset? You're accusing the BJP of polarizing the electorate and this and that. It's interesting. When I talk to people in the BJP, I find that they're quite upset if you don't say that. The underlying assumption, there's no secret here, right? The underlying assumption is that is a major part of the way that the BJP runs its campaigns, and they want you to say that, right? So
this is the threshold limit
Oops.
which you have found that.
What is this? Windows update. Wait an hour? Huh? Just to wait an hour? Yeah? Okay. Okay. Sorry? Good.
Limit of or the contribution of the Muslim population which can be accepted by the BJP government.
Yeah, right. It looks like it, right? This is just 2 elections, but this might be interesting to sort of continue to do this across states and across elections to see, are there numbers right around 20% at which you start seeing polarization
So
picking
it's
up?
like in a family, if you are giving one part or you are giving favoring more than a particular limit, then the another one will not be happy in that way.
Yeah.
It's like okay.
We can do the same thing with the Jatav population. So the census gives you by Dalit caste, because that's what it means to be scheduled. So I can actually look explicitly at the Jatav population. Again, there was a lot of discussion that, Mayavati had lost her base and this and that, and it's true, Mayavati's base has been eroding. Remember, the red is 2014 and blue is 2017. But again, once the Jatav population is sufficiently large, the BJP strike rate drops. So it seems quite likely that the Jatavs did not switch away from the BJP. Everyone else seems to have voted for the BJP, but these groups that we associate with not voting for the BJP broadly did not vote for the BJP. Okay. So the group that I'm interested in is the non-Yadav, non-Dalit, non-Muslim population. Unfortunately, there's no counting of that data. It doesn't exist. There's no caste census. There's no reliable caste census that's publicly available in India after 1931. Okay, so what I did is I said, okay, well, I can't do that, but what I can tell you is the percentage of the population that is neither Muslim nor Dalit. Right? That is Hindu, basically Hindu and OBC and general caste. And I can plot the strike rates for those groups. So I look at the percentage of the population that is neither Dalit nor Muslim, and if it's less than 40%, you can see that neither in 2012, no matter whether it was more than 60% or less than 40%, the strike rate was pretty much the same. The BJP was not in the game. In 2014, if they're less than 40% is of this sort of general and OBC Hindu population, the strike rate is 50 to 60%. If it's more than 60%, it jumps up to around 90%, right? 85, 90%. So you can see there's a huge gain in this population of general castes and OBCs. And as I said, it's a de-alignment for strategic reasons, and it's also, as I'm going to discuss in a second, a fight against a particular kind of particularistic politics, right? So if the SPs are associated, if SP is associated with Muslims and Yadavs, and if BSP is associated with Dalits, who's left? It's these guys, right? And I have argued, in some ways, it's quite surprising that UP held out as long as it did, because it's always been susceptible to this kind of counter mobilization. Because if I go to an earlier slide here, how many, I mean, these are numbers that we can get from the census. This is a guess. How many of each of these groups are there? This is less than 50% of the population. It's being split between two parties. Everybody else on the other side, yeah?
There is a problem here. Now you are saying caste is important. Earlier you said that you were doubtful about that. You were talking about secular factors influencing elections.
So
this is macro, but that's micro, is it?
Exactly. And so part of the reason, well, so what I want to do is I want to play with this concept of when caste matters and when it doesn't, right? So it isn't the fact that these people are voting because I'm Rajbhar. And I'm going to give an example from my field in a second. I'm voting because the other parties refuse to give me anything, right? So if that's my motivation, and not just because I want to see somebody of my caste up there, that's a very different way of thinking about politics.
How do you judge that?
How what?
How do you judge that you don't want to see your caste?
So
You're saying.
yeah. So well, I'll talk about UP in a second. So I'll finish up my field notes here, and then I'll ask if you still disagree. Okay, so I'm going to go to Gujarat, maybe. If I have 5 minutes, I'll talk about Gujarat. But I want to finish up with some field notes here to finish up the point that I'm trying to make. So I think from this, there's a pretty strong data relationship between saying that if you were OBC or upper caste Hindu, that you voted for the BJP at a much higher rate than what we'd seen in the past. And that seems to be what gave the BJP this kind of huge victory. So Rajbhar is a OBC caste. It's a very low OBC caste. They're always sort of fighting for scheduled caste reservation. The Rajbhar man looks up again from the bicycle he's working on and says, "We need someone like Narendra Modi who is with all castes." This language is not unique to the region. In Farrukhabad, next to a bridge over the Ganges, we meet a small shop owner from the OBC Lodh caste who complains, "Hamari ginti nahi hoti," we're never counted, bemoaning the fact that his community is not explicitly counted in the caste religious arithmetic of SP and BSP. Like the Rajbhar family, the shopkeeper's hope rides on the BJP. The popular view of the BJP from the ground is a party that does not see caste, and certainly does not work for a single caste like the Jatavs or the Yadavs. This is an extraordinary reversal from the politics of the 1990s in UP. The electoral rise of the BSP and SP was built upon a narrative of upper caste domination of the bureaucracy, and parties like the BJP, against which subjugated groups like the Dalits and other backward castes and Muslims had to forcefully assert their power. Today, many of those same backward castes seem more willing to ally with upper castes than with Yadavs. It's a stark reminder that politics has a way of eventually catching up with political science. While Jatavs, 13% according to the 2011 census, and Muslims, 19%, and Yadavs, purportedly around 10%, are numerically large groups, even combined they are far from a majority of the population. In the long run, a party logic that only distributes to a defined small fraction of the population cannot sustain broad coalitions across caste and religion. It's a principle that is showing its teeth at a most inconvenient time for Akhilesh Yadav. So again, I wrote this about a week or two in. But the point I wanted to make here is that if we look at the composition of the BJP, so I'm sort of going from, it's actually largely upper caste people, Thakurs and the upper caste representation in legislature, and there's some papers Christophe Jaffrelot has been writing about this, and Gilles Vernier has been writing about this, is at levels that we have not seen for a very, very long time. You have a situation where low OBCs, non-Yadav OBCs, were perfectly willing to allow upper caste representatives to allow, perfectly comfortable being represented by upper caste politicians, right? It's not like there's huge Rajbhar representation in the constituencies. Hmm?
You see, look at all those supporters of Hindutva Brigade.
Yeah.
All the, including Yogi Adityanath, they are all OBCs, other OBCs, not the Yadav OBCs.
Well, so
And
Adityanath is a
they have
Thakur.
supported, they have all along supported Ram Janmabhoomi movement, starting from with that Kalyan Singh,
Right.
who was the chief minister.
Right. No. So look, I think that there's more in that piece about Hindutva actually. I think no one can deny the impact of Hindutva, especially in UP. But the point is that this particular mobilization of the SP and the BSP that we're talking about is actually post that, right? It happened in the 90s. It happened after. It actually happened after Ayodhya, right? Right. So that's what I'm saying. So that is a massive sea change, right? These movements where the lower caste de-aligned from upper caste actually happened after Ayodhya, not before, and they're coming back. They're coming back, and they're perfectly willing to be represented by upper castes. But a lot of it has to do with the fact that certain parties are associated with very, very particularistic politics. If I'm from a Rajbhar family, can you really blame me for not thinking that the BSP or the SP doesn't have my best interests in their heart? I mean, there is a perfectly good economic logic for why someone from the Rajbhar family may be more willing to go to the BJP than either of those two parties.
Don't you think, I don't have data on this, don't you think that BJP's opposition, party composition, especially at the lower levels, and also the RSS cadre,
Mm-hmm.
this composition has changed enormously. I think there are lots of people from Rajbhar and other backward castes.
So I think, I mean, almost certainly that's what's happening. Right, right.
Backward castes.
I mean, it's still weighted towards upper caste because that is its historical base, but definitely.
What do you mean by upper caste? This is Ravi's question. I'm sorry, I don't want to mock with you.
Yeah. No, it's fine.
The reason why I'm asking, who is the upper caste? Brahmins are 7%.
No, but Thakurs are a big group.
Thakurs are larger.
Thakurs are big.
How
right?
much? How much
They're
more?
10% plus as well.
No,
They're a dominant group here, right? I mean, Yogi Adityanath is a Thakur as well.
So the Baniyas were about 50%.
Rajnath, what?
Baniyas,
Yeah.
right.
Right.
Who were earlier
Yeah.
controlling state politics. If you go by Brass's,
Right.
Analysis
Right.
of Uttar Pradesh politics earlier, what you notice is 7 plus 5, 12, 22%. All
right.
these upper castes.
Right. So, I mean, one of the things to think about is that are we going to see this cycle again? At some point, I think the very depressing part of this story is that if you are from one of the 3 or 4 communities I mentioned in this piece, is there any political party that you can actually go to? I mean, maybe there's a form of this politics that, assuages these groups, but I think most people think, if I look at just what's happened to UP in the last, even just like a year, my instinct is that already a lot of these groups are a little bit upset. They see that the Thakur domination of certain, it went back to that old thing again, right? Get rid of the Yadavs, bring in this other caste group, right? I mean, this is...
It's a small minority.
Exactly. So a lot of these are very, very small groups in and of themselves. I mean, there are many of them, right? I mean, as a whole, they're a large group, but any one identity is actually not that big.
And the trend of, these reports, these television, media reports, try to project the BJP as mobilizing as polarizing on communal lines using the Hindutva ideology and so on. Now, is it, if in Gujarat and other places, if the vote share is going down, is it because, there's this very significant body within the BJP which says that because we have gone, we have projected secular issues rather than Hindutva issues, our vote share is declining. How do you respond to that?
So
we have to have more communal rights
I think the way that I'd answer that is the communal rights work in some places and not others, right? Muzaffarnagar is a very special place in a number of ways. But look, as I said, in some sense, the BJP also does not want you to deny its communal character, right? It is openly communal in that sense. And I think it is a fundamental part of who they are. I do think, however, that a particular version of it is not palatable to a large part of the country. I don't think it's something that another sort of well-known political scientist once told me. He said, the thing with Hindutva is that it gets people mobilized, but it is not. Maybe times are changing, but it doesn't seem like something that can genuinely hold even 40% of the Indian population at home. Just think, like my family comes from Bengal. The moment you say that you can't have fish,
Bengal is different.
Right? You can't have. No, but BJP is the number 2 party now in Bengal, right? I'm just saying, right? It's not as if it's.
No, there are explanations wherever there. Anyway, I don't want to.
Yeah, exactly, right.
I'm interested in your last statement. Is particularist politics dead?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't even talk about that.
Is it because of the higher BJP strike rates? You feel that particular politics is getting dead because BJP represents a bigger interest, a general interest?
I think that's what it is. I think in some sense, if we try to take I think Hindu is bigger than any one caste, right? Whatever that particular way of building a coalition is, right? You see a very common jibe against the Congress party in many of these other places, exactly that you were benefiting only a small subset of people, groups. It's a kind of politics that, whether it's fair or not, whether it's a fair accusation or not, it's a kind of politics that looks to be in trouble. And I think that's not a bad thing for India, obviously. But it's extremely hard to construct a system in which you can consistently give benefits to a very narrow percentage of the population purely based on identity, not on other things, right? And that you can stay in power over and over and over again, right? So I think that in some sense you're getting a situation where you're coming back to what should normally happen.
Particularistic and general politics. Is not India a bigger general than the Hindu?
Of course it is.
And therefore, when you talk of a nation, within the nation always you have various particular, always interests are particular. Interests are particular. Policy you try to make it general, but interests are particular. And the justice is an attempt to bring about a movement towards say improvement in say other particulars than those who have already benefited.
No. I agree that India is obviously much more than what I would say in also in defense of this is that, look, in electoral politics you're going to create some kind of coalition. It's not going to be 100% of the population. But the reason why the BJP is so bothered by Gujarat, beyond it just being home turf, is that this model of class politics is something that's extremely hard to counteract, right? It is not, you see, the Hindutva card or this sort of Hindu coalition making card is quite effective against particularistic politics. It's not clear that it is how well it fights against something else that builds a coalition at that scale, like class. So.
The analysis of farmers that you have given.
Yeah.
Number of farmers less than 40%. and the areas where the BJP has taken is less,
Right.
and the percentage of farmers is more than 65.
Right.
The data is based upon the actual
Census.
census.
Yeah. So what
Okay.
we did was we. So I should actually mention that at CPR there were 3 researchers who did an amazing job taking, Ashish Ranjan, Shomindro, I'm blanking on Shomindra's last name, and Kanu. Anyway, three researchers who actually went to the smallest unit in the census and were able to figure out where things were. No, it's census data. I know.
So I'm Adarsh. I want to ask you one question. So my question is, like, in next year we have another election coming out, and it seems like the election will be like Narendra Modi versus rest of the party. So in that scenario, till what extent we can see? In that scenario, what will it really affect the BJP and its Hindutva model, or it'll get more aggressive? So what's your prediction on that?
So look, I think that during elections there is a ramping up of certain kinds of language that is inevitable, I think. I think we're going to learn a lot from these later elections, the Rajasthan, MP, Chhattisgarh. If those do not go well for the BJP, then you will see a very defensive BJP.
So because it has already been started by a few economists. Like if you'll see the Uttar Pradesh election, UP elections,
Yeah.
in that BJP won 312 seats, but BJP has not given a single ticket to a Muslim.
Right.
So in that scenario, do
No,
you think
but
like
Mr.
it?
That's the reality of the BJP. As I said, the BJP does not want you to deny its sort of Hindu character. That is not on the. In some sense, even this version of the BJP, even the Bajpai version of the BJP, which is not this one, there are certain truisms that are there, right? It was never a pro-Muslim party anyway, right? It's not. It's sort of not. Are you going to see a return of a very aggressive form of Hindutva?
Yeah.
Look, I think that the answer is that it always shows up during elections. I think that you can expect there to be communal violence in places that there have been in the past. I think some places in the east as well now you're likely to see. Bengal, you're likely to see it.
Right.
So that is a part of the electoral strategy.
So you are trying to say that this BJP and its ideology will get more aggressive in future?
What I'm saying is I don't know that it's gotten any less aggressive. I guess I'm actually questioning the premise. I don't know that it's any less aggressive, and I think that what you pick up at times is we think between elections it's become less aggressive, and then during elections you think it's become more aggressive. But in fact, it's there. It's a fundamental part of what it means to campaign as a part of the BJP.
Good evening, sir. I believe there are certain external factors also which are affecting the victory of elections, any party. So, for example, in 2014, the Congress lost because I believe there were a lot of scams during that time. So, do you think decisions like demonetization, GST would affect BJP to win this time? Because people are seeing that negatively, most likely.
I haven't seen any systematic evidence that the GST and demonetization have really hurt the BJP. Certainly in the elections that I worked, it hadn't hurt the BJP at all, UP and so on and so forth. But I don't know, right? It's possible that at some point this snowballs in a way that creates a lot of anger against the BJP. I doubt it. I think that what we're seeing, this is sort of one of my other pet theories. I think one of the things that we're seeing is that the voter in India is increasingly attracted to centralization of policy in all forms. So that's not just BJP. NREGA is a highly centralizing form of, is a highly centralized policy. GST, demonetization, Aadhaar, you name it. In some ways, the most popular policies that we can think of over the last several years are the most centralizing policies. So I think what Modi saw, which quite frankly none of us saw, it shows something about his political skill, is that you could do something like that and it would be popular. I don't think anyone would have guessed that doing that would have been popular, right? But he sees something about what, showing a centralizing fight against black money, no matter how ill-conceived, is in terms of his own personal popularity.
Apart from criticizing BJP for comparative game plan,
Yeah.
we should also see their election management through booth management.
Of course.
One thing. And secondly, if we see in northeast in Tripura, they have shown the exit gate to Mr. Manik Sircar based on their booth management and election management machine.
Absolutely.
And other factor is, which I think is Tina factor. There is no alternative. It's absence of leadership in opposition. And one of the dynast is being projected as prime ministerial candidate. And he who has not shown any positive track record in last 10-15 years.
Right.
So don't you think that these are the other factors apart from
So I absolutely agree. I mean, one of the conversations we often have, or I have with other parties, is you have to be ahead of the BJP by at least 3 or 4 percentage points going into the last 2 weeks. Otherwise, you'll lose the election, because the closing speed of the BJP organization is just that good, right? I mean, it is that much better on the ground in the last couple of weeks. I don't know about Karnataka. As I said, this is a separate. Karnataka in this way is a completely different state. You have two strong personalities, head of Congress, head of BJP, and they have their own cadres sort of associated with them in ways that we don't think. But in general, yeah, that is. I absolutely agree on the organization point. I think in terms of the leadership, so let me be provocative and maybe a little unfair and brutal to the Congress. When I go around and sort of spend time on the ground, and there's a lot of literature on the Congress system, and no, talking about in general. In fact, Karnataka is the one place where it may not hold as true, right? It's noticeable that the Congress is far less present in terms of party workers. Almost anywhere you go, even in states in which they are one of the top two parties. It's a remnant of the old system of elite co-optation that's been studied quite a bit in political science, as opposed to building a genuine sort of party worker-based party and sort of rising up the ranks, like let's say the left did, or like RSS has for the BJP. Now, what that has done, and incidentally, interestingly, the left has also gone this way, is that they have completely lost the ability to bring young people into the party, up the ranks, people who genuinely develop ground level popularity and move up the system. So you have very, very few characters like that left in the Congress, and in the left as well, right? They've all sort of gone elsewhere, and it has something to do with just extremely low intra-party democracy. The BJP benefits, for better or for worse, because of the RSS. Even though it has low intra-party democracy, the RSS presents it with ground level leaders in a way that other parties can't necessarily come up with. So when I look on the ground, I mean, I actually look at parties like the Congress and CPM, unless they, in the next 3-4 years, completely reinvent their organization, I think they're dinosaurs. I actually don't see them surviving, because you look at you look at the way the regional parties are running, you look at the way AAP is running on the ground, and you look at the way these guys run. It's just hard to see 10, 15, 20 years from now a Congress party or a CPM running like that and still able to win elections. I mean, at least in terms of, I don't praise any party, right? But no, certainly organizationally they've been quite impressive. No, sure, where they've gone, right? I mean, not all across India, obviously, right? But where they've done their magic, I mean, they are very, very present on the ground, right? Any other? Exactly.
Are you going to come back to study?
Yeah, I'm going to come once the elections are called. I'll do similar sort of stuff here. So.
We can put up a team to study Karnataka elections, both before and after.
Great. If you want, I'll be happy to coordinate a team. Hmm? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, let's see. I mean, let's see if I can do something. I'll do. I mean, take care. Okay. Thank you.